everyone. Thanks for joining Cindy and I tonight. We're with the Travel Collective, bringing you great travel information. Tonight, we're excited to have some guests who are going to share with us their stories about traveling and offer you some tips and suggestions. Our goal here at the Travel Collective is always that belief that travel is accessible to everyone. So by sharing our stories and real people with their real challenges or obstacles or just, whatever it is, that they inspire you to travel. And these, all of us are really inspiring, especially who we have tonight. So, Cindy, you're here. Thanks for joining, and let's get started.
Welcome to our guest. And we'll just start by having you, John and Dave, introduce yourself. So if you want to we'll start with you, John. You can tell us your name, where you're joining us from, where in the world you are, and just tell us a little bit about yourself, John.
Sure. Thanks for having me, for sure. I'm John Felligeller. I'm coming to you from the not sunny and warm world of northern Illinois. I live in a town called Highwood, about 45 minutes north of Chicago. And I define myself first as a special needs parent. I have a son, Christopher, who's 14, who's autistic nonverbal and about ready to graduate 8th grade. I'm also a teacher. I'm currently a special ed teacher in Chicago. I've been an educator for about 20 years in a variety of roles. And I'm also a special needs advocate. I work with organizations both locally in the Chicago area and also around the country, doing a variety of things, speaking, interviews, podcast, blog, that type of stuff.
Great. Thanks, John. And Dave?
Oh, hello there. My name's Dave Barr. I am in Colorado, and I am totally blind. I have been since birth. And I am a self-advocate, disability advocate, accessibility consultant. I do a lot of front-end user testing with screen readers, and do a lot of traveling and speaking on behalf of people with disabilities, and lots of things of that nature. And I've done podcasts and have talked to you guys previously.
Wonderful, thanks. So each of us, if you can tell us how you make travel accessible, maybe share a story about how you've made travel possible for yourself and for maybe someone like John, for your son. So if you want to start, John.
Sure, absolutely. So the specific challenges with my son, it has a physical ability to move. He's totally ambulatory in that sense, but it's a cognitive issue, and it's an anxiety. Also with communication, although he's nonverbal, he's there because he will let you know, because he will, makes a lot of noise and he gets very excited, especially on, in moving stuff, whether it's a car, train, that type of thing. We've actually never flown with him because we just felt that it was just too much. I'm currently divorced, but I can reflect back on a lot of experiences I've had, both, in terms of going on trips solo, but then also, with his mom. One of the things we had to figure out, first of all, was, car travel was pretty easy, right? Because, what we had to understand is that, we had to be able in kind of a moment's notice, if he had a bathroom accident or if, he needed, whatever, if there was some kind of distress, you can always kind of pull over and kind of figure it out. Well, one of the issues, first of all, is that if you're not really flying, which we never have with him, and of course, when you're raising a special needs child, money is a concern. So we had to really be kind of frugal and really be creative with stuff. And there are a couple of great things we discovered. So one thing that we used to do was we partnered with an organization called Johnny, Joni and Friends. Johnny and Friends is a Christian global disability organization. And here in the States, they do something called family retreat. And family retreats happen all around the country. Essentially, it's a way for special needs families to both afford and to also have the physical support in the terms of actual one-on-one support people to be with your child or young adult for a week. Most of them happen in kind of like a campground kind of an environment, but we actually used to attend one up in Michigan, right on Lake Michigan, actually, at a conference center. And so the accommodations were better, the food was great, and all these activities, right? And that was a great way to, do vacation, because again, the thing that people need to understand when you're raising a child like this is that there can be limitations, right? Certainly there can be, physical issues in terms of mobility, depending on the nature of your, health concerns. There could be equipment that needs to come with, and a whole variety of other things that need to be accessible and are not always depending on where you go. So it's great to have an environment where all that is kind of already prepackaged and taken care of for you. But, we had done that for about 5 years, and then it got to the point where we had to do something else. It was just a little bit harder to get on the wait list for something like that. So my now ex-wife came up with the camping. Now, when you have a special needs child and you're camping, are you serious, right? And that's what I said too, because growing up in Chicago, growing up in a big city, I love being outside. Never really did a lot of camping, and I'm thinking, how's this going to work? We tried it for a couple of years. I would tell you that some of the biggest challenges were, again, you have to rely on going to a public bathroom house, which one thing we learned was that in certain states were better than others. In Illinois, not that good. And when he's nonverbal, he can't necessarily tell us what he needs. In my case, for example, I'd go to sleep really hot and wake up really cold, with the temperature differences and whatnot. And we tried, and we had some hit or we actually had one episode where we had a major kind of a bathroom meltdown, and I'm like, okay, we need to do something different because this doesn't work. So then we actually moved to getting a travel trailer and research, and we looked at a bunch of stuff, and we were probably some of the most interesting customers that these RV dealerships had, because we're looking at them and we're looking at the amenities and all of that, and literally my ex-wife and I are going around this thing and we're banging on stuff and we're pulling on things and we're shaking stuff, and looking at us like we're nuts, but we're like, this is what our kid will do to this, so we want to make sure it stays intact. And so we did something that probably isn't as intuitive for people, and we actually went with the higher end item, and we actually purchased an Airstream. We purchased an Airstream because of the long-term durability, and also the quality was just that good. And we got one that was in our price range and just big enough for us to travel with. I will tell you again, growing up in the city and not doing a lot of camping or any of this stuff per se, learning how to do all this stuff is really, really fascinating type of a deal. But I did learn it, and we did travel. Unfortunately, when I got divorced, we had to have custody for my son. We had to have custody for the Airstream. So unfortunately, I don't use the Airstream anymore, but I know how to use it. And what I will tell you is that it was a very ingenious way for us to travel, because my son loves being outside. He doesn't need a lot to entertain him, but we needed decent accommodations, clean stuff. And honestly, one of the things that the Airstream afforded us that a lot of the other RVs didn't was it actually had one of the bigger bathrooms, which for him and for his needs, because someone needs to be in the bathroom helping him out with different stuff, that was really a really important thing for us in terms of that decision. So I would tell you that if you're a special needs family out there, you can do these things. You just have to be creative with it, and don't necessarily poo-poo them or dismiss them to say, well, there's no way I can do that with my kid. Well, maybe you can, because I know for one thing, I would probably be more afraid to get my son on a flight, regardless of how short it is, and thinking what that would be like, as opposed to putting him in a car or, having us sleep in a tent one night, or, hitching a trailer and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's great, John. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like it was a journey for you to get where you got, right? With you and your son and your family to figure out what works for you. So I'm sure others have, the same thing happens for all of us to find the lifestyle we want for travel, right? What works for us. So thanks. So Dave, let's hear, some of how you've made travel possible for yourself and maybe even others. I know you do a little bit of that as well, advocate for that.
So I've traveled a lot by myself, and when my wife was alive, she had a brittle bone disorder, and she was in a wheelchair, and she died in 2017. But we traveled a lot together as well, and it was me and her and my guide dog. So it was always, we were always an interesting trio going towards airport security. They usually never knew quite what to make of the three of us, but we got through it. The security took 2 to 3 times as long as usual. But it was always interesting when I was traveling with Priscilla, for example, as my wife, as to how they would deal with the wheelchair. I don't care for United Airlines for that reason. We never flew them, because if you look online, there are videos of them basically destroying power wheelchairs, and her chair was a $22,000 chair. Southwest and Frontier, from what we experienced, were good airlines, and we went with them quite a bit. So that's something to keep in mind, is how does the airline treat the chair? And there was one time where they couldn't figure out how to get Priscilla's chair unlocked. And I tried to explain to them that there are 2 switches behind 2 lights in the front of the chair. And the woman goes, all of a sudden she goes, "Here, I have a picture of the chair." And she showed me a picture of the chair. And I was like, "I can't see your phone because I'm blind." And she was like, "Oh." They eventually had to like carry a 360-pound chair down from the tarmac, and they wouldn't let me go out there to show them what to do. And then they finally got the chair. Somehow they didn't destroy it. And they set it down in front of us. And I said, "Here's the switches." And they all went, "Oh." And I was like, I tried to explain this as best I could, but you wouldn't show me. You wouldn't let me go out there and show you. So that was one experience that of several different types. But anyway, as far as being a totally blind traveler, I think my experiences have been helped by, I get a couple of things. One, there's an app out there that is called IRA, which is AIRA, and it is an app for blind people or people with low vision, if you will. It's an app I can log into, and I can have somebody go through my phone's camera and describe to me where I am, and they can read me things like recipes or directions on packages, or they can help me travel. So after Priscilla died, I discovered this thing called IRA, which people had been talking about, and it really was kind of a game changer for me. And I've traveled through airports with it. They used to have a pair of glasses that they hooked to a phone that would work. They've since discontinued those, unfortunately, which made my life a lot easier because I could go hands-free. But I have used IRA through the airport, and I've used it in LA and Costa Rica and New York and places like that. So that's been really helpful. But as far as other challenges, I would say the most challenging things I get for me tend to be just in perception of people with disabilities. I wrote a LinkedIn post about this, and I'm writing another article about this because about the airport security people who tend to talk to the person who's guiding the person with a disability, in my case. I was at the airport traveling to New York to go sing at Carnegie Hall with some people a couple weeks ago. And the airport security person said to the guide that I was with, "Oh, can he follow instructions?" And I couldn't resist. I said, yes, he can. I am hearing, and my brain can comprehend language. But there seems to be this misperception of that I can't, because I can't make eye contact with the security person and I have a cane. So that's been, it's frustrating, and it shouldn't happen, and they should have better training for stuff like that, I think. But for every bad experience I've had, I've also had good experiences in the security where they talk to me completely normal. So, it's kind of a crapshoot when you go there. But that's one thing. But I guess just as far as challenges, it's just a matter of people and their perceptions of people with disabilities, and the fact that a lot of blind people travel on their own and they get through hotels just fine. I got through New York just fine and went to some great restaurants and, sang at Carnegie with a bunch of choir people, and then got to go to a Yankees Red Sox game, coldest baseball game I've ever been to in my life. But it was a lot of fun, and made some great friends along the way and had some great adventures. That was just one example, but I've done a lot of traveling by myself. I'm going to Washington in May, doing a panel similar to this, actually, about accessibility and travel. So I guess that might be a very roundabout answer to your question, but that's what I can think of.
That's what we were looking for, right, April?
Yeah, it was a beautiful answer, and just as you pointed out, Dave, the perception that just because you might have one challenge or impairment, we all have impairments, and that doesn't mean to speak to you or offer the wrong tool that you need. I know you shared a story once too of other things that have happened during your travel. So I thank you for your honesty. And
yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. I know that, Dave, is something you're passionate about, is getting training to the folks that working with at the airports, at the hotels. People should have the right education and understand what people are going through, and be respectful when they're, encountering somebody who's different than they are, whatever that difference is.
Right.
For people with all kinds of challenges, regardless, and they may overcome them, or they may need help, but figuring out what's the right way to ask the question is sometimes, or how to help. We can all use help with that. And that's part of the reason April and I are doing this. We want to learn too, and we want to be able to make travel accessible to everyone that we encounter who says, oh, I can't go because it's like, no, you can. There's got to be a way.
Right.
There has to be a way you can go and experience these things of traveling. So you guys have been sharing some great stories, so I'm going to ask for some more stories. John, would you mind sharing us a good story? Share sometime when you traveled with your son and an experience that you are thankful that you had.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually an experience with tent camping. So tent camping is not all bad. And living in the Chicagoland area, most of what we tried initially, either with the camping or even with the Airstream, were campgrounds either in Illinois, Wisconsin, some Indiana, that type of thing. But we did tent camping, I want to say in 2018, I believe. And we went up to Devil's Lake. If you're familiar with Devil's Lake, it's actually around the Wisconsin Dells area. It's a beautiful state park there, without question. And it's funny because, again, tent camping with a special needs child is just so challenging and interesting. One, again, because there's communication issues, because my son is nonverbal. And so, you have to make sure that you've done the bathroom 20 times before bed, and make sure that he's got his drink and whatever he needs, and we're changed and blah blah blah. And we also had a dog too. We had a family dog at the time. He has a service dog now, but we just had our family dog with. So again, there's a lot of moving parts. And it's one of those things where, again, I think if you're a special needs parent, when you just think about it, you're just exhausted. And it can be. But it's one of those things where you say, okay, listen, we want to travel with our son. We want to have these family memories. So we're going to kind of push through this. So I remember that we set up camp, and then the next morning we got up really early to hike around the lake and in the general area. And I would tell you, it was probably about 7-ish. I mean, we got up early, and just got dressed, and we drove over to the lake. It was probably 10-15 minute drive, not even. We get to the lake, and I will tell you that the Devil's Lake, in terms of the Chicago area, Midwest, it's probably one of the more picturesque scenes, that you could, really, kind of just immerse yourself in, type of thing. And I remember that we went for a hike kind of around the lake, and it's July, and so you wake up in the mornings, you still have this steam coming off the water and everything, and it's just like something out of a movie. And we're hiking along, and it's pretty rocky. It's a pretty rocky shoreline path, but you can do it. You just have to be careful. But I remember at one point, our son just kind of sat down to take a break, and he sat down on this rock. Now, again, he's non, so he doesn't have oral language, but he does make sound, right? And through that, you can kind of figure out if he's happy or distressed or whatever. Well, he sat down on this kind of flat rock, and he basically, the only way I could describe it is singing. He just started to sing at the lake, and it was just this kind of high pitched, kind of all lilting, and my wife at the time and I were just kind of looking at each other like, wow, he's talking to the lake. Look at that, but it was just one of these cathartic experiences, because he's just there, he's immersed in it, and it's one of those things where you say, okay, well, this is worth the extra work. It's worth the extra work for us to be here and to experience something like this, because, again, he didn't need a lot to entertain. He's not a kid who's going to complain all the way, oh, this is going to be boring, I don't want to go, where's my video games, where's this, where's that. He loves being outside. You just have to support him to do that. But if you can get him out there, it's a joy. So, and that's where I say, with special needs families, don't be afraid to push the envelope. I get that it seems hard, but if you're prepared right, if you know your child, if you kind of know the pitfalls and what you need, if you're prepared well enough for it, you can do it. You can be successful with it. And there are some other presentations I've done on this where I go in a little bit more of a deep dive, and I can tell folks how to connect with those. But essentially, the bottom line is that anything is possible if you're prepared well. and you kind of, you don't go into it blind, or you don't just assume, well, this will be fine because of whatever. Do your research, do your background, but most of all, take a little bit of a risk. Take a little bit of a risk, because you never know. Like, I never thought we would have an experience like that, and it was so worth it. I would have gone through, whatever trouble we had that trip. I mean, to be honest with you, the night before, I think we were so lost even just trying to find our campground that we must have drove around it 2 or 3 times, and it's a state park, so it's big. But all of that trouble and all those little inconveniences were so worth it for what we saw, the next morning.
And that's how it is for, everyone who travels, right? You lose your luggage, and there's just sometimes it's exhausting packing and unpacking, and oh my God, but that one moment, that's why we do it, right? Whatever that is, whether you got to see something, experience somebody, you met somebody. So glad that, John, you're able to do that with your,
what a
son.
beautiful experience. I mean, that's just, and so encouraging and inspiring to other parents that whatever,
Right.
I mean, children could be a challenge no matter what, but especially one that you can't always know. Are they enjoying it? Are they not? But it just must have melted you to hear that and watch his eyes and his expression of viewing the view. I know Devil's Lake well, and it's a beautiful spot, but for you to know you facilitated that moment. So incredible. Amazing. So Dave.
Yeah, let's hear yours. Just a story, Dave. You probably have a whole list of them too.
I have to follow that.
Exactly.
I do my best. Okay. That was very cool, because I could picture it all as you were saying it. I have a zillion of them, but I think the one that I'll just pick for this particular is that which one do I want to pick? I have two. I have two that I keep thinking about. But I'm going to go with this one because it just happened. But I signed up to sing with a choir at Carnegie. And not a lot of people can say that. And I signed up back in November. I learned the music and went with a group of about 50 people. And it was great. It was standing on a stage that, my idols had stood on and sang, and people like Ella Fitzgerald and Duke Ellington. And as we were finishing our last song, we did a version of I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, the U2 song. And then our end song was The Lion Sleeps Tonight. And, we got everybody singing in the audience. Oh, we what? Oh, we what? Oh, we what? Everyone's just having a blast. And I'm just bopping along, just swaying along with the music. And all of a sudden I felt two hands on either side of me. And the girl on my left and the guy on my right were trying to show me to come down stage, because we were on risers, about 125 of us. And they kind of guided me, sort of reverse guide. Technically, I'm supposed to grab their arms, but here we're all trying to sing this song, and they were trying to show me go down stage, and they guided me down the 2 stairs of the risers, and I'm still just singing along. And then I sort of felt someone push me from behind, which was a little jarring for a second, but then all of a sudden this voice in my ear, one of the other basses goes, "You're front and center, buddy."
Oh,
and
awesome.
I'm just bopping along, singing along in the bass section, and standing front and center on stage at Carnegie, and thinking about, all I could think about was all the people that had been there since 1893. And it was really just an amazing feeling to be in such a historic place, singing such a silly song as Something by the Tokens, which everybody knows, but it was just kind of ironic. And here we are at this, wonderful venue of classical antiquity, if you will, classical music. And but it was, singing a song by the Tokens from 1960, and it was just great. But that's one of many other stories. It was that story or my Costa Rican adventure, but I'll save that one.
I love that story, Dave. That's awesome. And I think we talked about this before. I think when we spoke before about how when you go to a place and just knowing that other people of history or other, just knowing that's happened in that space before is meaningful, that you're standing in those same spots. And so there's something, you can almost feel it. It's part of what happens. It's in the air. It's how the place smells, how it sounds. Like there's so much going on. That's so great that you were able to stand there and feel that and experience that. I think we would all be in awe of being on that stage. So,
right. Yeah. I know. What an
I'm honored we get to talk to you, Dave.
Well,
and what
thanks.
an incredible experience, and so wonderful that you were able to take advantage of it and find out about it. And like you said, not everyone's, many of us won't get to do that. There's many things and that's why Cindy and I love meeting travelers. There's experiences we know that we don't have enough hours in this lifetime or may not get those opportunities. And
yeah, and it sounds like, Dave, you take the travel advice of, if it's offered, just go, just say yes to all of those things. Because April and I talk about that a lot too. Just if somebody says go somewhere, go. What are you waiting for? Don't say no. Who knows how amazing it will be. There's so much to see and do out there. So we're rounding up the half hour. So do we have one more question?
Yeah, we have another question. We're just going to ask each of you if you have some suggestions. Maybe, I know you pointed out a website, Dave, that might be really invaluable to travelers. So suggestions or words of advice, maybe a place that to reach out to. I know you mentioned a camp, I believe, John. So John, just any tips, places to reach out for those that need or want these additional.
Yeah. So first of all, I guess my general advice again is, don't be afraid to take a risk, right? You can travel and you can travel well, but a lot of it is doing your homework and research ahead of time. I mean, obviously there are some places like Disney, for example, that really, tend to be pretty good with the accommodations, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other places you can equally travel. And I think a lot more places are becoming accessible and more accommodating to folks on all levels of the spectrum in general, but you need to do your homework. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, in terms of the camp, again, is Johnny, Joni, and Friends. Again, it's a global Christian disability ministry, and they do family retreats all around the country. And it's actually for a pretty affordable price. You can go, and they will provide you with a one-on-one aid. Regardless of your child or young adults, regardless of the nature of their disability or even the severity, they can make it work. Right. Again, it takes a little planning, but, they will figure it out for you to give you an affordable, enjoyable vacation where mom and dad can actually get a break, because a big word with families like ours is rest. In terms of when do mom and dad get a break, both of them at the same time. That doesn't always happen. So it provides a nice opportunity for a family vacation, as well as mom and dad to get a break and everybody kind of have fun. The other thing that I would also really suggest too is one thing we tried with our son. So my son has technically never been on a plane, but we tried a program through American Airlines called Ready for Flight. And so this is a program, and a lot of different, and I've actually researched it, a lot of different airlines and airports around the country will do this, where it's basically kind of a disability friendly kind of a run through. So they get the experience of going through security. They get the experience of what it's like to go through baggage check, boarding the plane, sitting on the plane, and literally the plane will taxi around the runway, and they'll rev up the engines and they'll make the announcements. And we were convinced that this is not for my kid, because he was jumping up and down in the seat and screaming his head off in joy, like, this is the best. I'm like, well, I don't think we're going to try this with a bunch of strangers. But the fact is that if your child can travel, this is a great way for them to get a little practice. And so again, I don't have a website offhand, but I know if you just throw it in Google, you'll get some lists on there in terms of airports in your area of the country, that will allow that. And again, in terms of just other general suggestions I have, I'll just mention, like, if you go on my website, or specifically my website, because I have done some blogs and also some other presentations on travel in the past. So you can always kind of dig around in those as well. So, if you ever want to, find out a little bit more about, our experiences with that, you can always check that out too.
That's great, John. Thank you. And Dave?
Let's see. As far as the app that I mentioned, it's an app called Aira, AIRA. Their website is aira.io. And that's really been a game changer. It's been very helpful for me, for everything from, hey, how do I cook this, to, hey, I'm stuck in LA at this Airbnb and I want to go to this Mexican place. How do I get there? Oh, it's 2 blocks away. Okay, help me over there. That was interesting. There was a phone booth in the middle of the sidewalk. I hadn't seen one of those in years.
Yeah.
But as far as I too have some blogs, in-sightfulliving.com is my site. But as far as just general advice, I would just say, don't be afraid. In my case, don't be afraid to ask questions and talk to me directly, because chances are I've heard the question before. And if I haven't heard the question before, I will try and figure out some sort of answer and try and help you out as much as possible. But it's definitely, travel is feasible as a blind person. It's possible, it's doable, it's fun, it's enjoyable. There are, obviously there are things that are different for me that can be anxiety provoking, but I get through them as best I can. And I have adventures and stories for every trip that I've taken, and I've taken a lot of trips. So thank you so much for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. We have one question. A lot of people have been commenting as I've been watching, but Bill asked Dave what group you're speaking to in DC.
Actually, it's in Spokane, Washington. So Washington State. It is the, what is it called? Public Relations Society of America Travel and Tourism Conference on the 23rd of May.
Okay. That answers Bill's question. He's saying he's a tour guide in DC, so obviously the wrong Washington, but next time.
Wrong Washington, but yeah. I love DC, and we should get in touch with me because I've done some fun stuff in DC. We should talk about that. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Definitely. Wonderful.
All right. Well, that because we've made it over the 30 minutes. We don't want to go too long here, but thank you both of you for, sharing your stories and telling us and making us, everyone feel like, travel is possible. And if you guys have questions out there, if you're watching now or if you're watching the recording version, just go ahead and put your comments. We will help you connect with Dave and John. We'll put some of their information in the description here of this video. So if you like our video, just like and subscribe below. We'd love to have more subscribers and keep watching. And we'll talk to you guys all soon. Thank you
so much,
Thank you.
John and Dave.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.